Okay, welcome everybody. Hello, and welcome to the fourth Share for Rare webinar. My name is Suzanne. I'm from the World Duchenne organization, and today Becca Leary and Kathy Turner will explain what translational research is and how it works, and they will share their lessons learned from TREAT-NMD. So Becca is the Euro-NMD project manager and the TREAT-NMD program manager. And Kathy, as you can see, is the Duchenne program and TACT coordinator at the John Walton Muscular Dystrophy Research Center. But before we dive in, I'd like to get a few comments on following along. First of all is that the webinar will be recorded and will be made shortly afterwards. So if there is any need, if you can't follow or if you have to drop out, no need to worry. And it will also be uploaded on our YouTube channel, where you can also find our previous webinars. And if you're on a desktop or a laptop, in your right panel, you can see the chat box underneath the audio and the webcam. If you have any questions you want to ask during the webinar, just ask them there, and we'll be answering them shortly after. As you can see, you can always use the hashtag Share4Rare S4R. If you have any questions, you can always reach us via info@share4rare.org. So for the agenda, for the next 45 minutes, we first like to give you an update on the Share4Rare project and our goals. And after that, Becca and Kathy will present the tools and resources they use for TREAT-NMD, and they will discuss the importance of good patient registries. And we'll end with some top tips for building tools in the rare disease area and have a question and answer where we will answer your questions. So first about Share4Rare itself. What we are is actually we're a platform that enables the sharing of knowledge, data and experience to advance rare disease research. As we say, we consist of 8 consortium partners, which are 8 organizations that work together to launch the first pilot that we will be doing in February next year. The project is granted by the EU and is coordinated by the St. John de Deux Research Foundation in Barcelona, by the Patient Engagement in Research Department. So the reason we do this project is, as you can see in the next slide, the world as we know it is interconnected and hypersocial, but still rare disease patients suffer for isolation and misinformation, and that's due to a lack of available research or to connect with people just like them. And that is because diseases don't really have the large support as, let's just say, common diseases to advance in research, in clinical trials, or even in awareness. And this ecosystem of rare diseases is really full of knowledge, but you need somebody to initiate collaboration and connect the dots to create a kind of collective intelligence. So as you can see in the next slide, Share4Rare aims to help that with the help of an online platform. So we bring rare disease communities together. Just because you're rare doesn't mean you have to be alone. So we use that collective intelligence to educate rare disease communities and to enable them to become citizen scientists, to generate that collective intelligence and to boost rare disease research so we can improve those lives of those affected by them. And connective intelligence is actually a kind of wisdom of the crowd that emerges from sharing knowledge, thoughts and experience between patients or patient families or researchers, clinicians. And we do that through stimulating 3 things: education, sharing, and research. So what we do is we engage the rare disease community by offering a platform that focuses all information in one place to create space for sharing thoughts and ideas in a safe and a secure community. And we also educate people through providing information and tools to develop the concept of citizen scientists to empower patient-led research projects. And last but not least, we also help those citizen scientists to enable and establish a research ecosystem. So that power of all the biomedical analysis of the clinical data that is collected is a really powerful tool to radically change the scientific knowledge in the field of pediatric rare diseases. So as you can see in the next slide, this February we're going to launch the platform through piloting 2 groups of rare conditions, which is neuromuscular disorders and pediatric rare tumors. And here you can see a list of all the conditions included. And if you are, or if you know somebody who might be interested in joining the project and really advance his or her rare disease research, you can always contact us on info@shareforrare.org. So that's the Share for Rare project. And one of the ways we actually share that kind of knowledge and enable the collaboration is through organizing these webinar series. So if you head over to our Share for Rare YouTube channel, you can see the earlier webinars we did on social media and rare diseases and fundraising and how to read scientific papers. And this webinar we'll add is about translational research. And what that is will be explained by Rebecca Leary and Kathy Kennedy. I'm sorry, that's Turner, excuse me. So in the next 45 minutes, they will share their lessons learned from TREAT-NMD, which is a specialist network on neuromuscular disorders. So Rebecca and Kathy, both thank you very much for being here. Please tell us everything about how you create an infrastructure and how it actually works. Please unmute yourself if it's possible.
Apologies for that. Okay, so I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes about some of the resources that TREAT-NMD has developed and can offer, and then Kathy's going to take over to also show some interactive resources that we have. So I thought it would be important to first explain what we're talking about when we say translational research. Often it's called from the bench to the bedside. So the things that happen scientifically in the lab, such as biomarkers, which are a measurable indicator of a biological condition, animal models, which are used to test compounds and diseases, through to the trials, which happen in the clinic, right through to the patient. So this is the translational research pathway. And without an infrastructure to support this pathway, clinical trials and therefore therapy development is not really possible. So TREAT-NMD is a network of excellence that was initially funded by the European Union. It's always had global collaborations, and since 2011, it's operated without any grant funding as the TREAT-NMD Alliance and now has a global remit. It aims to help promising new treatments for neuromuscular diseases to make the transition from the lab to the patient. And it's not a research project itself, but an infrastructure project that can facilitate research. And it aims to create the tools for trial readiness for therapy delivery in the neuromuscular field. We do this through helping researchers, expert centres, patients all collaborate better, with the ultimate aim of improving patient care worldwide. So why do we need to have this neuromuscular network? Well, by definition, neuromuscular diseases are rare diseases. And as most of you on this call will know, doing things in just one country for rare diseases is never enough. There isn't enough patients, there isn't enough expertise. So we've worked collaboratively to tackle issues that can't just be settled in one particular centre or one particular country. We wanted to provide a platform to support and accelerate translational research to allow therapies to be brought to patients. And we also wanted to add value to the research aims of individual groups. And it's worth saying that so far we're doing a good job, and TREAT-NMD is working in that there are now, for neuromuscular disease, the first therapies are now reaching patients. So as I said before, we want to create the infrastructure. So we do this by building tools. And these tools are tools that wouldn't be considered to be developed in normal research projects, things that people find difficult to fund, such as patient registries, outcome measures. Outcome measures are measures to work out whether or not a particular therapy or a particular compound is actually having a positive effect on the patients. We've done a lot of work for preclinical things, such as standardizing animal models, and also importantly, TREAT-NMD's had a big role in supporting patients by providing care guidelines in family-friendly lay language. All of these tools are areas where international consensus is essential to make the real progress. And I'll highlight this again later in my talk, but On the TREAT-NMD website, we do have a registries toolkit, and so that's an actual resource that anyone in any other disease area can use to help them to build a good registry. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, but around all of these pictures of all of the different tools and resources that TREAT-NMD has developed over the last 10 to 12 years. These include the registries, but also things like the ethical framework and a site of care and trial site registry. Each of these tools represents a stage on the translational research pathway, right from the standard animal models that are used in the clinic up to the care standards that bring the treatments to patients. So one of the key things that I would recommend any person who's in rare disease field who doesn't yet have an established network is to set up a patient registry. So what is a registry? It's an organized system using observational study methods to collect data. This can be mainly clinical data, but also other data to evaluate specified outcomes for a population. The data is usually collected in a database or a spreadsheet, and more often in open source website platforms are used as the technology is developed. All of this tends to be collected through questionnaires or CRFs, either filled out by a patient or by a doctor. Some registries are local, some national, but for a lot of the rare diseases that we're working with, the patient numbers are so few that there's often global registries. Within TREAT-NMD network, we have diverse types of registries. We have patient self-reported, where patients are able to enter their own data. Often this is on a publicly available website, so people can log on and input their information. There are also professional reported registries that tend to be done during clinical visits, and a combination of both. So the patient would put in their data and a clinician would verify that it's correct. And as I already said, we have national registries for those common and rare diseases and international registries for the ultra rare conditions. So what are the uses of registries? Why should you set them up? So if your disease area doesn't currently have any studies or any trials going on, a registry can be a crucial tool because it allows industry or academics who want to set up a trial to evaluate how feasible it is to carry out a clinical trial. Once the patients are on the registry and they're all verified as having that particular disease, registries can also be used for clinical trial recruitment. This will help patients to find trials and trials to find patients, and it also provides more quality of access to trials. But the registries have more than just the trials that they can benefit. Our registries have allowed us to undertake a lot of research into rare diseases, and we've conducted burden of illness studies, we've done studies on the standards of care, and we've been also able to use the registries to look at the prevalence and incidence of our diseases. So the TREAT-NMD Global Registry is a really good model because it was established about 7 years ago when we didn't have as many good IT tools as are out there now. So it works by each individual national registry all collects data in their own way. So it may be that the clinician entered, or it may be that the patient entered, or a combination. And each of these registries collects data in their own countries. I'm just going to quickly show you the breadth now of the global registries. So the ones with the yellow button, they're the DMD registries that are affiliated to TREAT-NMD, and the ones with the red buttons, they are the SMA ones, and the purple ones are a combination of both. So you can see we truly have a global spread of registries for TREAT-NMD. And the way the registry works is quite straightforward. Each individual country national registry commits to keeping a core data set. Now, it's not really important here what this data set is, although this was set up with a consensus building approach. It's just that each registry commits to keeping the data set in exactly the same way, so that the same data points can be shared. And what happens is we receive an inquiry from either industry or an academic that has a particular piece of research. The TG Doc, who are a governance committee who oversee the quality and the standards of the data, vote on whether or not they want that to go ahead. And then still in a sort of very low technology way, TREAT-NMD then writes out to each of the national registries that keep the core data set. And each of those registries then feeds back the data to the global registry where it's cleaned, a report is generated, which goes back to the industry or the third party that requested this. And just to let you know, it's always cumulative, de-identified data. It's never patient-level data that we provide. But this has been a successful model, and as you can see from this slide, these are all of the different inquiries that have used the global registries. And some of these names here that have used the registries are the ones that now have drugs at market. So it shows that the companies have actually used the tools, and it's helped them to develop successful therapies. This is an example of a kind of data that we can get out of the registry. So this is a real one that happened a couple of years ago, where as a result of the request, over 2,500 boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy aged between 5 and 10, we were able to look at the effect of steroids on them, and this was, again, it was used for trial design. Okay, I shall now hand over to my colleague Kathy.
Thank you, Becca. I just wanted to take you through a few of the other resources and tools that have come out of the TREAT-NMD network that I think have a particular utility and relevance to the wider rare disease field. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was TACT, which is the TREAT-NMD Advisory Committee for Therapeutics. And this is a group that was established in order to, initially back in 2009, it was established in order to help, it was thought at the time, mostly academic groups who had an idea, who had a therapy development plan, but they didn't know how to take it forward. They didn't know how to move through the translational pathway. So it was decided that within TAC, we had the expertise within the network, so we would establish this advisory committee for therapeutics that would help with that process. And that started back in 2009. We have a chair, Anna Maria De Luca, at the moment, and that changes every 3 years. Anna Maria is in Bari in Italy. Previous to that, we had Catherine Wagner at Kennedy Krieger Institute, and we've had other chairs previously. The TACT group is supported by the Secretariat, who are based here at Newcastle, and that's Professor Bob Straub, and then myself and my colleague Joanne. So as I said, the point of TACT, the purpose behind it was to support the journey through therapy development in rare neuromuscular diseases. It brings together world-leading experts to advise on individual therapy development programs. So the beauty of TACT, the reason it works so well, is that we have on our committee a core group of 12 members who are supported further by an extended committee of around 70 members. And those people really are the key opinion leaders and world experts in their particular field. And I'll show you a little bit more in a moment about the fields that we cover. So TACT provides comprehensive, confidential and specific advice and response to a particular applicant's needs. So we can we can bespoke our review panel to meet the needs of that particular application. And that, of course, is very important within a rare disease field where your experts are spread out. They might be difficult to access and get together all in one group. TACT is very much supported by patient organisations. We wouldn't exist without them, in fact. The funding for this process initially came as part of the FP5 grant when TACT was first started. But once that money stopped, once the funding period was ended, we've managed to be self-sustaining through a combination of donations paid by industry applicants who come to the committee, but also by patient organisations who support us in many ways. If we have academic applicants, they help to fund the meetings themselves. They provide input into the review process, so we have representatives from patient organisations on our review panels at every single application. And they also, importantly, they refer applications to us. So they pass people on to TACT, they refer them to TACT for a review when they're considering, for example, whether or not to fund a piece of research. One of the significant outputs of TACT is that it avoids errors early on. It helps to avoid predictable failure, puts clinical trials in a better position and puts programs on the path to success, also minimizing the patient burden and intervening early with advice from leading experts. And all in all, that improves clinical trials. So just a few statistics to show you how successful TACT has been so far. Over the last 10 years, we've had 19 meetings. They alternate between Europe and the US, one every 6 months. We've reviewed 53 applications in total, and those are across a range of different neuromuscular conditions. and that is expanding all the time, and that's important, I think, as clinical trials and as therapy development increases in different fields, in different disease areas, TACT is seeing more and more of those conditions. So the majority of things, as you might expect, have been in Duchenne. We've had a significant number of applications in SMA, but then also an increasing number of other conditions as well. And the thinking is that that can be expanded out to other disease areas other than neuromuscular in the future. As I said at the beginning, we initially thought that it would be academia that really required these services of TACT, and indeed they do. But what we found as time has gone on is actually we're getting more and more applications from industry who really value the input that the expert committee provides. So around 70% of our applications to date have been from industry-led groups, from small companies who have 6 or 7 or 8 employees up to enormous giants in the pharmaceutical industry, such as Roche. We have about a 50-50 split between clinical and preclinical applications, and we find that the earlier advice is sought, the better, in terms of better positioning of a program on a successful pathway, but also it needs to be far enough along that there's enough data and enough plan for the TACT committee to really give advice on. Okay, I'll skip through this a little bit, but this was just a slide to show the groups of people that TACT interacts with. But in particular, I just wanted to illustrate the range of expertise that we put together on a TACT panel. And this is where TACT really works well and will work well in other rare diseases as well. So we don't just have disease experts, specific disease experts, but of course they're important. We have experts from all this range of different disciplines as well. And they all sit around a table together and review the application, all feeding off each other's ideas. We work with regulatory agencies and have regulatory experts on the panels as well, and people involved in running clinical trials. So one thing that, as TACT has expanded and grown over the last 10 years, one thing that we've spoken to people about is expanding this model into other rare disease areas. So at the moment, we've expanded, as I said before, we've already started to expand beyond Duchenne and SMA and some of the more trial-active neuromuscular diseases into areas such as ALS and Pompe disease. We've received applications for review in those areas too. But we also we're now part of the C4C Pediatric Clinical Trial Network, which is a large IMI2 project that was started in May, and TREAT-NMD and Newcastle are partners in that. And part of what we'll be doing there is helping to establish the ACT model, so that's the Advisory Committee for Therapeutics, but in different rare disease areas within the pediatric field. So in order to do this, our aim is to develop a TACT toolkit. And in order to do that, we will be consulting on what that might include. What are the current needs of the wider rare disease community in this area? Where are the bottlenecks and priority areas? We will look at that and we will establish, as Becca was talking about a registry toolkit earlier, the aim is to establish a tactical toolkit as well. We also provide education about the TACT process, so for example via formats like this webinar, but also there's a picture at the bottom there, and it's a snapshot of part of the TACT workshop that we ran in Vienna in July as part of the ICNMD conference. But we can also take that workshop out to wider rare disease communities in order that they can learn about the TACT process and offer advice to people on how they might set up a similar network in their own disease area. Okay, so that was TACT and some of the education about TACT, but as well as that, within TREAT-NMD, we've been establishing education programs in various disease areas. And I think this is a really good example of how we've taken an idea within one disease area, so initially in Duchenne, but then subsequently in SMA, and have expanded that out so from DMD into SMA and others in the future. And this is to establish disease-specific masterclasses which aim to educate primary care providers and other identified groups in that particular disease field. In particular with Duchenne and SMA, it's been about trying to widen understanding of the standards of care and how those might be implemented and provided, particularly in different countries where the issues that people face might be a little bit different. The TREAT-NMD Educational Committee has oversight of this, so it's completely independent. And the content is independent, and the people who attend are chosen by this independent committee. And this is funded through donations from industry towards the cost of the meeting, because industry very much recognise the need for this in order to make sure the community is trial ready. Implementation of the standards of care and understanding of the diagnostic process is very important in order to, it's very important to industry as well as to patient groups and clinicians. So they are happy to give us donations to run these masterclasses, but we're completely independent from any industry influence. This means we can run the masterclasses at no or little cost to participants, which means that nurses, physiotherapists, other primary healthcare practitioners can come along to these events. It also funds posts to work on education activities and to organise the masterclasses. And this is a model that I'd highly recommend to other disease areas as well, where there is this educational need. As part of that educational process, we have taken the standards of care for patients and families. In Duchenne, this has recently been updated through 3 publications in The Lancet earlier this year. We've taken those and worked with the patient community to generate a guide for families. So taken the Lancet paper and produced a booklet, which is available online and will be available as a printed version, that families can take and use to make sure that they are fully up to speed with the standards of care that they should be receiving. This is also happening in SMA, and the plan is, again, following that same model, extending it out to other neuromuscular diseases. This is also being translated into around 20 different languages with help from our patient community colleagues. Okay, so I've mentioned the standards of care for patients and families. We've also produced other engaging patient information to encourage questions, and I'll be showing you an example of a digital tool that we've developed in just a moment. It's also important to work with young people in the advisory groups, especially in some of the pediatric neuromuscular conditions that we work in, and within the C4C network, which is a pediatric network. So in the UK, we have the YPAG, the Young Persons Advisory Group, but across other countries in Europe, there are similar setups, and also in America. We work closely with those people as well in order to get advice and input on the materials that we're producing to make sure that they are age appropriate, understandable, and engaging. Okay, so one of the things that we've done in particular that I just want to give you a little demonstration of is specifically clinical trial information for children. So it was felt that clinical trial information provision for patients was very much text-based, even those that were information leaflets that were provided for children taking part in clinical trials. So in Duchenne, we often have boys as young as 5 years old, giving their assent to take part in a clinical trial, and the information that was provided to them about that trial was paper and text-based. It wasn't interactive, and it was often repetitive, repeating previous versions. And it was reported to us by clinicians in the field that they felt that this was pretty much a tick box exercise. It was much better to have a conversation with the child. That was, of course, very important, but the provision of these information leaflets that were text-based was really not particularly useful. So, within TREAT-NMD, I worked a few years ago, this is an early version, with a colleague on trying to put together something that removed the information from paper and put it onto a screen. So I'm just going to see now if I can make this link work. I think I've already loaded it. This, before I play it, I'm just going to give you a little snapshot. This was a 15-minute sequence of a combination of cartoon, animation, videos, and still photographs that was interactive on an iPad. So you can see down the left-hand side, the menu, that could be clicked on by the user on an iPad or a tablet, and they could move through the sections and hear about a clinical trial. This was done as part of SKIP-NMD, which was an FP7-funded exon skipping for Duchenne trial. So the bit I'm going to show you is a little bit of the explanation that we gave to children about exon skipping and what that means. So I've got it in the right place. And what's important here, I think, particularly, is the use, what's particularly nice is the use of a child to explain to the other children.
We are trying to make a medicine which can hide a small mistake in your body's instructions. If the medicine can do this, the carriages with the broken magnets would be taken away and the rest could be joined to the engine. The train would be a bit shorter than normal, but it would still be a train. In the same way, your body would be able to make shorter distances. This would not be perfect, but we think it would be much better than we thought at protecting your muscles. Doctors and scientists just need to find out this.
Stop that there. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. Now, thank you, Mr. So that was a resource that was developed as part of the SKIP-NMD trial. I just wanted to show you as an example of something that we've done relatively simply. We recorded a child in a local primary school. We went in and we did the recording ourselves, edited it back in the office, and worked with a design company on a fairly small budget to come up with something that was just a little bit more engaging and interesting than a paper information leaflet. And when this was used in the SKIP-NMD trial, feedback we had from clinicians who were using it was that the boys were really very much engaged in the process, very much more so than they had been observed to be using just paper sheets before. I also want to show you a more sophisticated version of an interactive digital information tool, and this is something that's been created very recently as part of the Vision DMD trial. Now I can show you got permission to show a little part of it. It's only just been released, and they're currently consenting boys at the moment, so this is currently just about to go into use. And what we're doing here, and this will be shared with the community via a paper when we've had the feedback, is we are comparing some sites which will use this tool with other sites who will use the paper information that's been used previously. And we'll get feedback from the families and from the children themselves about how well they understood each of the resources and whether or not it made a difference to their clinical trial experience. So again, apologies, I have to click into the right place. Okay, so again, I'm just going to show you a little part of this.
When you come to the clinic at the hospital, doctors will do some tests with you to see if the medicines are having any effect on you. If you feel unwell, tell your parents or your doctor so that they can help. The study doctor will examine you. They will check how tall you are, how much you weigh, your body temperature, your heart, your chest, and your eyes. When you come to the hospital, you will have some blood taken from your arm using a small needle. Have you heard about magic cream? The doctor can put some cream on your arm before taking the blood. The cream is magic as it makes your skin numb, so you should not feel pain. You need to be very brave, which is why you may feel like a superhero. In the morning at home, before you come to the hospital, we will ask you to urinate, pee, in a small pot so that the study doctor can test your urine during your visit in the hospital.
That just takes you back to the home aid. I won't play any more of that now. But again, I wanted to show you some of the ideas that we've put into practice and some of the things that I think could be developed, especially for children, but of course you could do something like this for teenagers, young adults, and adults themselves in a way that was a little bit more engaging and interesting, and depending on the budget, interactive as well. Okay, I'll hand back to Becca.
Okay, I appreciate we've whizzed through a lot of different ideas and different tools that TREAT-NMD has. And I know some people on this call maybe at a much earlier phase than we are with their disease area. So in case you've been inspired by any of the things that we've developed and want to do something similar in your disease area, these are our top tips. Firstly, if you can find the experts and get them to work together, that's half the battle. And it's worth remembering that the experts may not be in the same country or even the same continent as you. So there's a little bit of research that needs to happen. I think a lot of the patient organisations can help to find the experts and join them together. Our experience from everything we talked about, the registries, TACT, and these interactive apps, Start with 1 or 2 diseases first, maybe the ones that are closest to clinical trials, or the ones that already have a therapy or maybe the commoner of the diseases in your field. And once you've got it right with one disease, replicating it becomes a lot easier. We believe very strongly in the power of patients. They're involved in every aspect of our work, and they need to be involved. They're really critical partners. If you're faced with too many challenges and too many different issues within your disease area, you need to identify the biggest needs and you need to prioritize. And there's also other large infrastructures that are available in Europe that can maybe help with this. For example, I'm thinking of the European reference networks. You should also look at what already exists out there. There are a lot of good initiatives, a lot of good patient organisations, often operating on a European level, who already have tools and already have resources that you can use. So look what's already there. Don't reinvent the wheels, but you can adapt or improve it for your disease area. For registries, please feel free to visit our website and use our toolkit, but it's really important to identify the purpose of a registry first. So if there are no clinical trials in your disease area, then the purpose is probably clinical trial readiness. If you already have a number of treatments and therapies, and perhaps a purpose maybe for post-marketing surveillance or some other purpose, it's important to make sure that you develop a registry fit for purpose. And I know there's a lot of speculation around industry, and I know that a lot of patient groups and organisations are wary of involving industry. But our advice is don't be shy. Industry aren't always the baddies. We've involved industry in almost all of our work, and they've funded a lot of our resources, and we have a collaborative partnership with them. We're very careful that anything that industry funds us to do is not a promotion activity for their product or their trial. And we have a lot of ways that we've had to handle this. So if anyone wanted any more one-to-one advice about that, we'd be happy to talk you through how we work with industry. Okay, this is just a little plug here for our website. And this is where you can find the registries toolkit, and you can also become a member. We'd really love it if some of you who've been at this webinar today would join up and receive our newsletter. It's free to join, and you'll get a lot of tips and ideas for the resources that we have. Please sign up to our newsletter.